Introducing the Open Palm Podcast with host Jerome Shaw, available today on your favorite podcast platforms. The Open Palm Podcast is a positive, uplifting, motivational, and inspirational podcast. The host brings his insight and philosophy, and you can't help but gravitate towards his smile, his words, and his wisdom. Again, the podcast he hosts is titled The Open Palm Podcast. It's about inspirational messages, motivating themes, and thought-provoking ideas and topics. He'll also help you become more aware and in harmony with your own life, giving you a better understanding of your place in the world and using your skills accordingly, greeting the world with an open palm instead of a closed fist. You can find the show today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. You can also connect with the host on Instagram at Jerome Shaw. That's JROMESHAW on Instagram. Jerome Shaw with the Open Palm Podcast. Motivation, meditation, mentality. Go listen, download, and subscribe today.
The Prime Minister of the Tang Dynasty was a national hero for his success as both a statesman and military leader. But despite his fame, power, and wealth, he considered himself a humble and devout Buddhist. Often, he visited his favorite Zen master to study under him, and they seemed to get along very well. The fact that he was a prime minister apparently had no effect on their relationship, which seemed to be simply one of a revered master and respectful student. One day, during his usual visit, the prime minister asked the master, "Your Reverence, what is egotism according to Buddhism?" The master's face turned red, and in a very condescending and insulting tone of voice, he shot back, "What kind of stupid question is that?" This unexpected response so shocked the prime minister that he became sullen and angry. The Zen master then smiled and said, "This, Your Excellency, is egotism." Sometimes the best way to learn something is not by having explained to you, but by experiencing it yourself firsthand. Actions, as we know, often speak much louder than words. In this example of egotism, it is hoped that the Prime Minister had a good sense of humor as he was shown by the Zen master firsthand what egotism is. What does egotism mean to you? Do you shun your ego? Do you find your ego necessary? A sense of who you are, a sense of your identity? Do you carry yourself with a certain amount of pride and dignity? Do you look down on others? Do you look up to others? Or do you view others on an even playing field? Egotism. Such an interesting word, such an interesting theme, an interesting concept. You know, they say that ego is a 3-letter word that actually can destroy a 12-letter word called relationship. I urge and pray that you do not let your ego get in the way of your relationships with others, especially with those that you love, for in the long run, looking back, you may not find it worth it just to be right. They say that it is much better to be kind than to be correct. Much better to be compassionate than to just be right. To be right all the time, to have an opinion that is always correct. One of the beauties of being a human being is that we are fallible. We get things wrong. We're not always right. But it makes room for learning. For if everyone was perfect, what room would there be left for growth? Having an ego can be said to be something of importance. But there are also other questions that this story might ask. Was the Zen master really insulted by the question? Was his ego challenged? Or was it just an act? Was he merely showing the Prime Minister what ego means? Also, think about the act of asking a question. For whenever we call someone else's question stupid, that is also being egotistical. Questions can be seen as very necessary. To ask is a very wise thing, for how else would we learn? If we never ask any questions, to me, that is also a sense of ego, for we are essentially saying we know everything and we needn't learn anymore. Not humbling yourself enough to ask questions is saying that you know all there is you need to know, and there's no sense in learning more. But how can you teach a person who knows everything? Have you ever met someone whose ego was so large that nothing more could go in? A closed mind, one that you and other listeners of this podcast do not have, I believe. For if you are listening to this, I believe you have an open mind and are willing to listen to, maybe even accept or ponder upon other points of view, other perspectives. You are not closed. Being flexible to other points of view, it makes us into our greatest versions, the best version of us. For to take just one point of view and consider that the be-all, end-all, we may grow rigid and stale. Find out what egotism means to you, and find out how to work with it instead of having it work against you. Whenever you are challenged, how will you react? And if you have a question, can you lower your pride to ask it above your own ego? Thank you for listening, my friend. This has been Jerome Shaw on TOP, the Open Palm Podcast here in San Antonio, Texas. I pray you received an encouraging message letting you know that egotism, or ego as it were, is a 3-letter word that has the power to destroy a 12-letter word called relationship. But when we understand more about ego, we understand more about how we can interact with others in our world. Share this episode with a like-minded individual, learning and growing, becoming their greatest version, just like you, being all that they can be, letting go of ego. Pay it forward so more can hear the message. And if this is your very first time receiving this podcast, why not subscribe for more inspirational messages like this? And if you feel compelled to support, consider opening your browser to anchor.fm/jshaw. Clicking the support link there is much appreciated. Big shout out and thank you to all the wonderful supporters who continue to contribute to the podcast, making it possible for episodes like this. Much love. Have a wonderful and blessed day or night wherever you are, and take care. Hey there, my friend. So you've heard about Anchor, but do you know why it's the easiest way to make a podcast? Well, first off, it's free. It allows you to use creation tools that let you record your podcast right from your phone or computer. It also distributes your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. You can even make money from your podcast with minimum listenership. It's everything you need in one place. Download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. Can't wait to hear yours. Let's see what you have to offer the world.